Hi, you guys. So I'm super excited to be on here today to tell you guys about the night that my stroke happened. But before I jump into that, I really just wanted to say how hard this topic was to study and to read up on. Because, when people tell you something and you're just kind of like, yeah, okay, whatever. But when you actually read and study, it makes it sink in, and it makes it surreal at that point. And I had to take a few steps back and just calm myself down because this actually happened to me. And so it made it really sink in, and it was super hard for me to study this topic. So I can still remember me and my husband, we went to my doctor's for a quick checkup. I think it was a little bit after we were married, and he said something to me that freaked me out, but also proved that I need to start living life right now. And he said that I have a 100% chance that I could have another stroke at any time. And so what that means is, so I do have a blood disorder. It's called Leiden factor 5. And before I get into that, so as I was studying Leiden factor 5, I found, as I was reading through it, I found this other name for it. And before I get into that, I won't go into much detail on this, but I didn't really get a great education in school. My teachers kept passing me along to each grade. And so I didn't know this part, but so I saw this name, and it was called Factor V Leiden. So my husband came home and I was telling him all about it, and I was like, babe, there's another name for it. And he's like, oh yeah, well, what is it? And I told him that it was Factor V Leiden. And he held me and he was like, honey, the V is also a Roman numerals, which means 5. And I had no idea. So I was trying to sound super intelligent and I was going to even say this on the video, that there was another name for it. But he was so sweet, and he told me that it's okay, and but I didn't know that the V meant 5. So anyways, back to what that means is, so my blood doesn't know when to stop clotting. So my mom, she has one gene of it, and my dad has another gene. And I was the lucky one, and I got them both. And so, like I said, freaked me out. But I'm also so glad that I'm still here and that I'm still fighting every day. And I'm just super happy that I get to share my story with you guys and to let you guys know about pediatric strokes. And it has happened a lot more often. In 2009, there was 34% amount of people that went to the hospital because they had a stroke and they were under the age of 65. And it's just crazy because I've met people that were either born or that have gotten the stroke a little bit later on. But they were all under the age of 65. So it is possible that people can have strokes at any age. And so I, when I was in the hospital, I even met a girl that she was the same age, and she was a couple doors down from mine, and she had a stroke the same night I did. But her abilities were a lot different than mine. So the parts that affected my brain was, so I'm going to give you an example of like how to describe what's kind of happened. But in my brain, so have you guys ever heard the story of, so I've heard it many different ways, but there was this guy and he was working out like under his car, and he pumped it up so that way he could slide underneath it, but it broke. And so he was screaming for his wife, and his wife ran out, and she saw his legs just kick in, and she freaks out. So she runs over and she lifts the car off of him for him to slide out, and that adrenaline that was pumping through her body is kind of like how it is for me. My arm is always so tight, and my brain doesn't know when to turn it off. I can turn it off when I'm about to fall asleep, but like any other time, it is go, go, go. And that's kind of how it is for me. It's like the adrenaline is just pumping through me. So that's kind of what it's like for me. And it affected my sleeping. So no matter if I get like a full night's rest, I still wake up and I'm so exhausted. And I think that's kind of a little part of my arm, because my arm is just so tight and it doesn't give me a break. And so I think that's why that I'm always so tired. I wake up and I'm ready to take a nap. So that's kind of the parts of my brain that it affected, and I'm not sure if there's anything else that it affected, but those are just the things that I know now. And to jump into what happened to me that night, so I was 8 years old, and I can still remember it like it was yesterday, but there are some parts that, I forgot about, or I was sleeping through it. So I just got home from dance practice, and my mom, I'm not sure if she was mad at me or if I made her mad. I don't know, but she wouldn't talk to me or she wouldn't look at me. So she was doing the dishes because we just ate dinner, and I still had so much energy pumping through my little body. And so I saw my mom's exercise bike, and I ran and I hopped up on it. And I started pedaling as fast as I could, and I wanted to see how fast I could go. And my sister came over. She's like, check your heartbeat. So I put my hands up on the handles, and my heart rate started racing higher and higher, and I wanted to see how high it could go. And once it hit 130, I felt dizzy. I felt so sick. I felt like I was going to throw up dinner, and I could not focus. So I went over and I laid down on the couch, and I was doing my multiplication monsters. Great idea. I can still remember the little monster that I was working on. But so I was doing that, and my mom, she heard me say something, and she was like, Morgan, are you okay? And she came over, and I saw the look on her face that scared the crap out of me. It turned from, ooh, I'm so mad at you, but I love you, that I'm going to check on you, to instant fear. And that scared me so much. And so she said that my right side of my face was drooping. And my mom, she asked me to raise my arm, and so I tried, and I really couldn't. But the fear on her face, and when she grabbed me and put me in the car, and she told my sister to take my brother upstairs and that she would call my grandma and that she'd be over there as fast as she could. And so my mom called my dad and told him what was going on, and my dad told my mom just to stop driving and to call 911. And so I still remember the street that we were on, and she pulled off and she called 911, and so we heard the ambulance and the police cars, and they raced right behind us. And my mom was like, "Oh my gosh, I told you the wrong address to the operator." And the operator was like, "It's okay, they'll be right around." And within seconds, they were already at our car. And so the paramedics had me walk to the ambulance, and I walked just fine. I hopped up on the bed, and they actually had me lay down. I still remember that. And they started asking me questions, and they kept looking at my mom to make sure that, I would answer the questions right. And they asked me what my name was. I told them that it's Morgan Carter. And they also asked me, what was my age. And I told them that I was 7. And my mom was like, "She's 8. And then after that, it did not make any sense at all. And so, they drove me to the closest hospital, and they ran certain tests on me, and then the doctor came in, and the doctor said she has symptoms of a stroke, but kids don't have strokes. And so my parents were like, "Okay, well then what the heck do we do?" And the doctor said that they could take me home, or they could take me to the closest children's hospital. And you better believe my parents were like, "No, you need to get her down there right now." So they drove me down there, and they did an MRI, and I only know this part because my mom had told me this, but so they put me in the MRI machine, and I'm kind of like tied down in a way, so I couldn't move my upper body. And so at that point, when they put me in there, I threw up. Beef stroganoff, which after that I did not like whatsoever. And I kept moving my legs, trying to get somebody's attention, because at that point I couldn't talk. So I kept moving my legs, I kept trying to move my body, and the lady was yelling at me. She was like, "You have to stop moving." And I just kept moving. I was like, There's throw up on my face. It went up my nose because I'm laying down like this. And so my dad, he's like, "Something is wrong." So he got up, he looked in through the machine, and he's like, "We need to get her out of there. She threw up." And so the nurses came in, they pulled me out, and my parents were so mad. But they pulled me out, they cleaned me up, and by that point, I was so exhausted I just fell asleep. And so they put me back in, did an MRI, and at that point, they had confirmed that it was a stroke. And so the doctor came into my room, and I'm not sure how close all this stuff was, so it might have been a little bit spaced out. But the doctor came into my room, and he sat down, and he was like, "Okay, so I'm going to ask you some questions, and I want you to shake your head yes or no." And so I was like, "Okay." And so he pointed at the TV, and he asked me, "Is that a TV?" I shook my head yes. and he pointed at a pen, and he asked me if that was a pen. Sorry. And then he pointed at my parents, and he asked me if those were my parents. And I looked at them for a second, and I shook my head no. And my mom and dad, they were devastated that I didn't know who they were. And, sorry, I told myself I wouldn't cry. And so I saw my mom crying, and I was thinking, who is this lady and why is she crying in my room? Like, I don't know who she is right now. And so my sister heard about this, and she was out in the waiting room. She was praying her little heart out, and she finally came into my room and she sat down on my bed. And she asked me, and I kind of looked at her with like a confused look on my face, like, okay, what are you doing? But she asked me if I knew who she was. And I sat there for a few minutes, or a couple seconds, I don't even know how long. And I looked at her and I was like, yeah, I know who you are. And that made her so happy. And later on, like, I realized that they were my parents again. But it really broke my parents. They were super devastated. They didn't know who they were. And then a little bit after, I think it was 3 days after, I was able to start talking again. And, I could walk, but the doctor wanted me to have a wheelchair. So that way I wouldn't fall down or hurt my head even more than it already was. But that is basically the story about what happened that night and a few days after, of course. But it was a super hard time to get through. And later on, I would like to go into more detail on my schooling and some other stuff, some of the hardships that I've had going through school and dealing with bullies and everything like that. But I just wanted to end with I know how hard things can be and how scary stuff can also be, but just keep fighting. Fight every day. And if you guys have any questions for me, I would love to answer them. Or if you guys just want to talk, that would also be great. Or if you know of somebody that's had a stroke and you have questions, or if they would just love to talk to me, I would love that. I do have a Facebook page. It is Morgan's Journey, and I also have a YouTube page as well, and it is Stroke Survivor, but it has a little 8 where the O is supposed to be, which I think that fits perfectly because I was 8 years old when it happened, so I kind of came up with that on my own. Super happy I did. But I just wanted to tell you guys that I love each and every one of you guys, and I'm super excited for next time. And I will get on, not this next week, but the week after, and I will talk to you guys then. You guys have a great day. Bye.